Ladies and gentlemen, this is Thrice with Thrice's Download, coming at you live on Spreaker.com. Today's topic is going to be wild fermentations, love, and care. So, hope you guys are having a wonderful week so far. I know I've been doing late night podcasts, even if you're looking at lifeislifetraining.com and you've been seeing that saying morning times between 9 and 11. We actually might be switching over to evenings, not sure. We're running to get this LILT radio network going, which is kind of what this show is going to be a part of in the long run, and having other shows like this, as well as promoting music that covers topics as far as the mystical, magical, or quantum. Anything moving forward, evolution, revolution, everything for the free thinker in order to evolve. So, but moving forward with today's topic, because I like to keep these short and sweet. Wild fermentations. Today being Tuesday, in the aspect of call to action and being active in your life and active in things that you choose to do, fermentations are something that we can do every day in our home that actually are some of the origins of certain things that we buy in the store, like soda pop. Soda was originally a fermented drink made in the home from natural, either berries or herbs, spices, tons of different things. Root beer is one of the more traditional recipes made from different roots of different plants. And these things, when put together in the wild form, actually produce a probiotic effect. If you didn't know, all fermentations before they are cooked have this very strong probiotic effect, especially dependent upon the different kinds of things you're using. As far as the microbial organisms, such as kombucha. Kombucha is it's a mass culture of different bacteria and yeast, and they create these things called scobies, which is SCOBY. I believe it's symbiotic cultural organism of bacteria and yeast. And basically, these things, they call them mushrooms. They don't really look like mushrooms. They just kind of look like the tops of mushrooms floating on tea. But they're this gelatinous kind of rubbery thing. And really, you can dry them out and make fruit leather, or scaby leather, which is like fruit leather. You can actually dry out thick patches of it and make real leather. The Russians used it to make soles on their shoes in World War I, I think. I don't know, World War I or II. Russians were creative with this stuff. But it's an amazing resource, not just for the probiotic effect of the tea that you make with it, but also for the scaby itself. It's really good for dogs. There's tons of different things that you can do with these scabies. And then also the tea, because that's basically what kombucha is the tea. That can be not only drinking in the less vinegar state, but when you let it go over into the more vinegar state, it actually can act as a shampoo, which I've talked about before, or a hair cleanse. We use in our house multiple different products for our hair, but they're all natural products and they're the raw substances. Kombucha is one of them. It's one that releases a lot of the oils, but it allows your hair to feel very strong and not tangled or split. And it's actually something I use to untangle my hair. Put the comb in kombucha, put some kombucha in my hair and run the comb through, and it goes right through since I've gotten longer hair. So that's just one example of what a wild ferment can do for you. And kombucha started as a wild ferment, and it's been cultured over the years, but it's not made in a factory. It's still a very much living thing that you have to cultivate in your own home. And it produces other scabies, which are called daughters, and the mother is the original scaby. And those daughters then produce other daughters, and they become mothers. And it's a continuous cycle until you either kill them or, purpose them out to other people. Now, this is pretty fascinating because it means that these scabies are changing and evolving every day, And I've actually had some reactions where introducing the aspect of jeûne, which is instead of using sugar and certain kind of teas or certain kind of herbs and spices to make the kombucha, you use only green tea and then subtle spices, and you make jeûne with honey, no sugar, where kombucha uses sugar only, because honey can kill some of the bacteria and yeast. So jeûne is its own category because honey has its own kind of yeast because there's tons of different kinds of yeast. It's fascinating. I'm actually going to be learning more. I'm hoping to get somebody on who I'm talking to who talk about different kinds of yeast, but that's for the future here. So, but in June itself, it started producing these new daughters from the original kombucha mothers, and they look similar. They're a little lighter and they're thinner, but it's very interesting to just see the difference in how they change and evolve and adapt to their environment. They're still producing offspring. They're still multiplying. That means that it's a healthy culture, and it still turns to vinegar. It still, tastes good. It tastes like a fermentee. It produces carbon dioxide. It's doing everything that it's supposed to. So that's just a fascinating thing to me, folks, is the aspect of these wild living cultures that live in their natural environment. All you're doing is creating it, but going into even more wild ferments with the aspect of food. Now, this is something that is just fascinating for me, is fermenting food and getting either probiotic liquids or the fermented food itself, and actually both, because this becomes such an aspect where you're fermenting the food substance into a form. Let's start with bread. Okay, so you're fermenting the dough in order to make sourdough. And that sourdough, if you add a certain amount of water, it not only can you create a sourdough starter, but you can also take the liquid left over and you can make a form of alcohol. And you can actually create sourdough beer. So that's just one concept right there. All of that being wild yeast. You take the dough, you put it out with a cheesecloth or cloth over it. You let yeast get to it. I sometimes use starters like kefir or using honey. I like to use honey. It actually is a really good yeast starter. But the dough itself will catch something if you have a pretty good environment in your home, or you put it outside in a good, clean environment. So when you do that, it starts to cultivate and ferment that dough, of course. But when you add the extra water and you're adding the extra dough, it also gathers in the water itself, and then when you go to put that in a sealed container, then you can start producing alcohol as you add flour to that. It's a basic concept of making beer, and there is that kind of beer depending on, you can use rye, you can use spelt, potato. It's just fascinating, folks, how these things all correspond together, and you can do them in your own home from the air. The air will give you the yeast in order to create these things, and it's just, if that's not a gift from the heavens, I don't know what is. So, and that's where it comes down to this love and care aspect, is these things, we want to be active in our life, we're going to have tons of things going on, but when you're caring for creatures, when you're caring for life forms, and billions of life forms, because that's how it works in these glass jars or tubs that you cultivate things in, it's a very interesting responsibility, because they will survive. They're so versatile, and they thrive because there's billions of them. So you only got to save, 100,000 to recultivate it. You only have to save a little piece of a SCOBY to really grow a whole new culture. And it's such a phenomenal analogy or allegory, metaphor for our own reality and who we are as a society, who we are as individuals, and in the aspect of, even though they can survive, the question is it fair to not care for them? To not put them in favorable environments, or put them in the fridge in the right amount of times, pull them out, clean their water, and refill them on their food and nutrients, just like you would fish, or just like you would cats or dogs, which are more fragile and will die if you leave them neglected. I've left kombucha stuff out for months and just come back and grab the SCOBY, threw it in something else, and it just bloop, bloop, I'm alive. I've left a SCOBY with barely any liquid in a container before, and then it dried up, and it was dry in there, took it out, put it in some more tea, and it just worked fine. No mold on the guy. She was completely healthy, and that blows me away as well, is the aspect of mold not occurring because of these very healthy bacterial environments. But that's this wild aspect of life, and you have to really love and care and nurture for it in order for it to love and care and nurture for you back. And that's where you start to discover things. Like I discovered ginger, fermenting ginger, and now we're fermenting lemon, and seeing the health benefit aspects of it. Fermented meat has really been a health thing for me as well. Just as I've talked about before about fermented raw meat. These living foods that give back to you as you give to them becomes a symbiotic relationship. And so in that sense, you know, you want to get things done, you want to stay on task, but does that mean you got to schedule everything for every minute of the day? Because that's what it comes down to. We've got so many ferments here, sometimes you want to feel overwhelmed. But getting overwhelmed, making it seem like everything has to be done all at certain times, loses the real importance of what living life is all about, which is enjoying the moments. So walking by and checking your ferments, seeing how healthy they are, putting a little pouch of flour next to your sourdough starters so you can stop for 5 seconds and put a little flour in and cover it back up and go up on your way. You know, being able to incorporate everything into the movements of your life is really what organization is about. Not about schedule or regiment. It's about being yourself and enjoying each moment you're given. Because when you step out of the enjoyment, that's when you lose sight of what we're really doing here, what this is all about. And that's why I think really fermenting and growing things is such a phenomenal perspective to start to become a part of. You know, it's like we're starting to do we've done oyster mushrooms and oyster mushrooms. We tried to do reishi, it didn't really work. We had enoki mushrooms, enoki taki mushrooms. Those are really easy to grow. We're trying to do some portobellos right now and some white buttons, but it's just like these relationships and watching mycelium grow and, you know, having to give it the right temperatures and giving it the right food source. The whole debate about mycelium and their environment and how you have to have this complete sterile environment, but the reality is mushrooms don't need a sterile environment to grow. They actually grow in very non-sterile environments, so it just kind of doesn't make sense. And it just comes down to health stuff and whatnot. But I mean, there's so much we can do as cultivators and, you know, caretakers to really understand the spirits behind these cultures, behind these plants or organisms, and it's such a phenomenal thing, folks. So that's just something for you today with wild fermentations. You know, it's not just with fermentations. You got to give love and care to all your food. You got to give love and care to everything around you. You know, and I think if you're going to start doing fermentations, you should come at it from that perspective right away. Is you're making that fermentation to care for you and your family, to give love to you and your family, that energy that is the source of all life. And I mean, I see it as love. That's only my perspective. But you have to give that back to those fermentations. You have to really be there for them in order for them to taste good. You have to pay attention, and you can create wonderful, magical things. And I mean, one thing I would love is to have a freaking herb and spice, you know, shelf that has all these growing herb and spices. We want to build that and for our kitchen, so that way we can just pick them off and throw them into these jars and bottles, because those are health tonics. When you can take different things and throw them in and let that ferment for 3 to 5 days, I mean, if you can let stuff ferment even longer, get the alcohol plus the natural herbs like a holy basil mixed with a natural fermented alcohol tonic for 3 months to 9 months, that's a medicine right there. And that's something that's phenomenal to me, is that we've lost the reality that we are our own caretakers, as well as the caretakers of our environment and the planet itself. And we as individuals, not the scientist or the doctor, you who's listening to this podcast right now, can take care of your environment. You can heal yourself and heal the earth if you choose to. And that's just a phenomenal thing to me, of how much responsibility we really have as individuals. So just remember, folks, this is a journey down the rabbit hole. That's what I try to do. This is Thrice with Thrice's Download. If you want to check out more, go to lifeislifetraining.com. You can see kind of what we're getting into. We are changing a lot of things up. We are going to have LALT Radio Network coming here soon with the full website. Going to have a channel here as well on Spreaker with all the different shows. If you'd like to get in touch with me about that, you can email us at lifeislifetraining@gmail.com. Also, Thrice369 on Twitter. We're going to be having the availability for Skype, so if you're listening in and you want to talk on some of the stuff we're talking about,